Hi, I'm Dr. Kyla, paediatric dietitian, fussy eating specialist, and mum of two. I'm the founder of the online Mealtimes memberships that help parents just like you experience a confident and guilt-free way of feeding children. I'm also a business owner, a hot cross bun lover, and my superpower is finding things that you cannot live without. In this podcast, I'm talking about feeding your family, along with a random selection of topics that tickle my fancy. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla. Well, hello. I've got my first repeat guest on the podcast today, mostly because she's an absolute pillar in my life at the moment, particularly as I navigate this second round through toddlerhood. So I welcome back Mandy Richardson, founder of Raise Toddlers, who I like to think of as my personal parenting muse. Hey, Mans.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Kyla. I'm really excited.
So the idea for this episode stemmed from a conversation that Mandy and I were having during our overnight hotel stay on Mother's Day evening, which in itself, Mandy, I think we might have to possibly have another conversation about. What do you reckon?
Well, I think we might be in trouble from a couple of husbands in the next few years as we recruit all the mothers to be having Mother's Day stayovers, and we'll be meeting up in different cities and just celebrating motherhood. Why not?
Oh, I'm so here for it. But let's go back. I was talking about my 3-year-old and how this time around we're having a different experience and one that feels really full on at the moment. And I was describing a couple of scenarios to Mandy, and as he helped guide me through, thinking about it, I realized that this would be so helpful for other parents, not just of 3-year-olds, I think in general. So I pressed pause on the conversation and decided to record it as a podcast instead. So I personally am looking forward to what Mandy is about to help me with. But some of the biggest challenges I think for our family are the extremes in emotion and how that kind of impacts on others. And then our worry that we're accidentally raising a bratty kid. Do you know that we're accidentally missing something and raising someone who's entitled and thinks they are the boss of our family? And I think this conversation was triggered by my husband saying something to me like, do you think we maybe need to consider some kind of timeout for her? Does that sound familiar, Mandy? Is that a concern that you're...
Absolutely. Not only does it sound familiar from the parents that I obviously speak to every single week in and out in our membership and on consults, but just I am a mum right now of a 3-year-old as well. And these, I think, are normal conversations that most parents are having. Even when you do have all this knowledge you're drawing on and research, you are navigating often your parenting of especially every different child you have. You don't just nail it the first time and go, oh, I've got everything I need. A new little person throws new curveballs at you. And I think that conversation of wondering, is this, I guess, the way we want to respond to these situations, or is there a better way, or what's the long-term effect of us continuing to respond like this? Is this gonna develop into a little entitled, like brat, as you say, or is this also, if we break it down, make the most sense for the developmental age they're at and what they're actually looking for as they navigate these tricky years themselves, because they are the ones also going through something for the first time. And it's sort of fun in a way, fun slash really hard, because you are navigating it with a new little person. So it is a journey that you're on together. And then obviously when you're parenting together as well, I think it's quite common for parents to be asking those questions and even challenging each other's thoughts about how we are responding. And I think that's not a bad thing, because I certainly know when we've had conversations, my husband's had a perspective that I've gone, oh, actually, yeah, I have slipped into a certain type of way of responding that maybe isn't best for her, me, or the family. And let's recenter and decide. In a way, it's consolidating why you do the things you do. And I think that's an important conversation to have.
I think that's a really good point, because I felt quite confident when I got through toddlerhood with my first daughter that okay, a lot of that makes sense on reflection. I feel like we grew a lot as parents. We had some really comprehensive guides in that, like you particularly, some of the Janet Lansbury books, like those things really helped me at the time. And I felt like it was hard, but we did a reasonable job. And maybe also this is like 3 years down the track. I'm like, that's not too bad. Whereas we're back in this phase again, but with some different challenges. And it's just making me question. I'm still overall confident in the philosophy. It's more like, and I think that's to do with you, like what I've learned across the way. It's not the big issues. Do you know, like I'm okay with managing the hitting or if she's refusing to hold my hand when we cross the road. It's more these little daily challenges that are just making me feel a bit unsure, and definitely my husband too, and frustrated about how we handle things. So let me set the scene. She's 3 and 3 months. She's a sensitive but pretty strong-willed kiddo. She is similar to my older daughter in some ways, but also much more confident in sharing her displeasure with things. So letting
More
us know.
externalizing everything that's going on inside. And that's an interesting point to make because temperament is a big thing, right? So
Yeah.
that's worth pointing out that it's going to look and feel different because they are their own individual little person.
Yeah. And it's already made me think like, okay, I'm probably trying to parent in a way that I did previously, and not necessarily tailoring it to her. So already I'm reflecting. All right. Should we talk through scenario one?
Let's do it.
Okay, so at the moment, she comes to most meal times, particularly dinner and breakfast. She climbs up into her high chair and then she screams, I want something else. And then she starts to wail like dramatically, like hand up against her forehead, head tipped back to the roof, kind of dramatically climbs down from the high chair and flings herself onto the couch or runs off kind of like heavy footed down the hallway into her room, throws herself onto a chair and continues to wail that that's not what she wanted. Obviously, like my experience is in meal times, and I feel pretty confident in managing the mealtime part of it. Like I have made sure there is always something on the plate that I'm confident she can eat. I don't ever force her. I'm not coercing her into the chair. Like I'm offering her opportunities to come back and join us. And inevitably she does. But it just feels like such a palaver. Like we're usually finished. And so I guess it's like part of this feeling that she's the boss of dinner. Like we're all kind of waiting on whether she's going to like
I'm
approve of what's on
queen.
the plate. Yeah, the queen has come and has she been served what she
Yeah.
wants?
Yeah.
And guess what? It's not. It's not what she wants.
Oh, so first question is where does she get the drama from? Where's the drama
It
class
is
coming from?
all my husband, not me at
Of
all. I would
course.
never be dramatic about a thing.
So funny. Well, obviously, I think just to start with is just going, wow, how common that type of scenario is, whether it is meal times. I think the thing that stands out for me working with parents week in, week out is, and having a 3-year-old myself and having two other 3-year-olds I've lived through, there's a few, like you build a bit of a pattern in your mind and you go, oh, that sounds familiar or seems familiar. And definitely the drama and the overtness of her being like, it's not what I want, and really letting you know 100% this is not my idea of what I have in mind is a very 3-year-old thing. It's a toddler thing, but it can be much more heightened at 3 because their main job at 3 is to let you know that they have their own thoughts, feelings, opinions, idea of how things are going to go. And she happens to be one of the ones who lets you know in a very concrete way. And that's maybe even why you're finding it slightly different because, like you said, maybe your firstborn was letting you know these things as a 3-year-old, but maybe in other ways that weren't so overt. And when you do have a child who's a little bit more externalizing and shows everything, it's also a bit trickier as a parent because everybody gets to see that. And so it can feel quite dramatic and quite a big deal, but the same underlying thing is going on where she is just clearly trying to make it very, very obvious she has a very different idea. And it's funny for me as well that it's breakfast and dinner. Dinner sometimes, I guess, it's where they are starting to be a bit more dysregulated in general. And obviously from meal times, you also know sometimes the appetite for a toddler doesn't always peak every single meal time. Sometimes there's, if lunch seems to not be her biggest, backlash, maybe not everyone in the family is there at lunch. So it's not
Yeah, that's
as
the
established myself. Maybe her hunger is, she's more likely to be ready to eat at that time. Maybe her connection tank's been filled. She hasn't just woken or about to part and separate. So there's other drivers to when they need to make it very obvious. So she definitely knows how to capture the crowd at these 2 times of the day. But just to normalize, I think that's always the first step in going. We can sometimes go, well, we've created this dramatic brat, but actually let's just normalize it. She's got a very out there way of showing you, but it's actually just very 3-year-old. Just letting you guys know I have a totally different idea to you, and my job is to establish that my ideas are really important.
I think the social part, you've made a good point there because I think our reticence in continuing on is like, what about if we're out at dinner? Like, what about when we're at grandparents' houses? We're going away on a holiday next month with friends. Like, what about if, she's behaving like this at every meal and we can't, socialize or have these nice times? It is probably like that social judgment fear that's kind of making us think, oh, is this a problem?
Yeah, like how can we get on top of controlling this behavior in a way, right? Because that's
Yeah.
often the drive in a parent is that taking charge in a way, but there's still ways we can take charge of the situation without necessarily controlling her or controlling, yeah, the exact way she behaves in this moment. So what do you do at the moment when this happens?
So at the moment, and I think this is probably when we do a reasonable job in managing. And I guess it's probably for me looking for that reassurance that this isn't a sign that we are on the wrong path. So most of the time we would acknowledge like, oh, that's not what you wanted for breakfast, or you wanted something different. And it's not even like she wants something specific. She just literally doesn't want what we have served. And usually we let her kind of run off, have her moment, throw herself on the couch dramatically. And then we kind of just keep checking in with her. If she's close by, I would call out or I will go over to her and say, like, I know you wanted something different. You can come and join us whenever you're ready. Because I think one of the things you told me early was like, toddlers don't like to be backed into a corner. So you don't want to kind of force them back. I mean, I don't think I could even do that. Physically, she would not allow that. But I don't want to like embarrass her in terms of coming up to the table. So I'm kind of trying to give her back, like, you can come when you're ready. And to be honest, most of the time she does. It just takes a really long time for her to then decide to rejoin us. And then by the time we're eating, like half the stuff in the middle is already gone. So then she's annoyed that there isn't something else. And
And does she come and have something to eat at some, like, does she
pretty
actually?
much, yeah.
And this is the conversation I think about these things is I guess a lot of parents, we all ask ourselves like, well, what else could we be doing? And like you say, and maybe that's the conversation that came up. Like if she's doing this, maybe if we gave her a timeout, she would just all of a sudden comply. And I think it's really important conversations to have because I just laugh back also to I love the laugh because it sounds great, but I will never forget and this is what drove me down this path of really, really wanting to understand toddlerhood in particular, but parenting and parenting philosophies from our generation and previous generations and all that stuff. Because I remember just being like, this is what you do when a child doesn't do such and such. You do this, this, and this. And then for our first, we were like right on it. You say like, no, that's not acceptable. Like you're going to have timeout, and we did, like I will own, we tried timeout for our firstborn and she's our strongest willed still to this day. God bless her. And all it did was create a new fight of me trying to keep her in her timeout spot. Like it was just literally this power struggle after power struggle after power struggle, trying to get in control. And I think the biggest realization was like it was almost pitting ourselves against each other and becoming like these power struggles that really toddlers do sort of retain in their brains, and then they need to repeat those cycles. So it becomes like, what started as a maybe I don't want what we're eating, and all the ways we respond can create new cycles that become the everyday thing. And sometimes it's also trying to put in other ideas or responses to undo what's become a really regular cycle for her. Like maybe even for her now, it's become that I do push away, then I become dramatic, and then I come and eat. And that's now my new pattern,
I feel like that is our pattern.
Yeah, and it's funny because they really do, and they really will sometimes replay those until we etch in something new. Sometimes I will say to families, it's sometimes changing it up completely, like having a little breather from breakfast being even at the table, and we just check just to break into the cycle when it's become really because everyone starts to play their role, and sometimes we just got to. So that's one idea, but certainly those concepts of parents thinking, or maybe we need to take more control here. And I'll never forget that one of the best parenting things I heard from a friend was, we can't really control our children, but the only control we can have is if we feel that need for control as a parent and we can't control the child, all we can do is control ourselves and our responses in those moments. And that does sort of at least shift that power to feeling like I want to fully control right now, but every effort for control, actually in a toddler and in a 3-year-old in particular, especially if they're strong-willed, there's something called counter will, and it pops up in toddlerhood, but particularly at 3, where the more you're trying to get them to do what you have in mind, the more they will push and counter your will. So sometimes you can increase that almost too much with the ways we're trying to coerce them back, or, like you said, you couldn't physically get her back. They should probably be kicking and screaming. If you
Yep.
put her in timeout, you might be rewarding her even sometimes for like saying, I don't want to eat that. You also might be playing new power struggle. So it's just trying to like break down, okay, well, let's think of what we could do and why we would even do that. And that's the sort of reflection we've got to do when we make decisions. Whereas what you're doing now, where you're saying, yeah, you really are letting me know you don't want that. Like that's sort of what most toddlers at age 3 are wanting. They just wanting to be validated that I'm my own person with my own ideas and I'm not ready right now. But permissiveness would be you changing the food. Permissiveness would be you catering everything so she felt perfectly happy. And, she's still not, in my mind, the one in control of the situation in terms of becoming the boss of your house, because you've all gone on with eating calmly. You've not let it affect the flow of the family. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah, I love that reflection because I do think we're worried, like, oh, she thinks she's the boss, like she can go away and come back when she's ready, and but I guess probably we are just giving her that space to be annoyed about whatever it is that she needs to be annoyed about, and then the option to come back without. I guess it's almost the part where you think, should I be punishing that, or like should I be teaching a lesson that like this is not okay, like when there's food on the table you need to come and join us, like there is, which is probably a throwback, right, to that kind of more authoritarian parent style, like
that's something that
you
we're
will be
trying to play
grateful.
around with. We're trying to find what the strategies we're using are and where they fit, and like exactly trying to break that down. Okay, if it was permissive, this is what it might look like, and if it was authoritarian, where I'm always teaching lessons and always you'll miss out on dessert, or what used to be
Yeah.
the case, right? Like, or can sometimes be the case, or I think logical and natural consequences probably still sort of fit with more within the window with this, which is what you're unfolding. The natural consequences, we are continuing to have family dinner or family breakfast. We'd love you to join us, but we are starting to eat now. Your food is right here when you're ready. We'd love to sit with you to eat. And there could just be some element of that where at the moment she's just feeling like, yeah, like I think if it arrested everyone's attention and you all stopped and you all went to cater to her, that would be a little bit more queen vibe where she is the boss,
Yeah.
But in a way, it is sort of like now when she does come, guess what a natural and logical consequence or natural consequence is like all the toppings that like were on offer like have been
Yeah, pick through. You've got
real
the
shame.
scraps.
And then if you go and top all those up and make it all perfect for her again, then, sort of it's all those small decisions where we can still be okay about validating, oh, you wish there was like still heaps of, whatever, sprinkles
Yeah.
to go on or whatever. Maybe next time, you can be the first to pick, or, so it's sort of like less making her be or trying to coerce her to be, but that is sort of probably where it fits, where she's not having a consequence as such. It's just not like an enforced punishment that's unrelated, or
Yeah.
that's probably where that would fit, with that parenting philosophy and trying to find our feet.
I do try and resist, like, because I think I've really learned from you that you don't have to like teach a lesson in every scenario. And part of me wants to be like, well, there's none left because you didn't come to the table when I asked you to come to the table, like when I ask you. And like, definitely, I have said that at
Oh,
times. And that
100%.
rolled out of my mouth really easily
I
then.
think that validates us more than it does anything for them, though. I genuinely do. Like the times I just go on a rant, that is me needing to stroke my own like brokenness around that, or like lack of control. But the truth is, it's okay to still make a statement, though. Like, yeah, and that's really where it's instead of a lesson, it's just a statement of, I guess, the exact logic of what happened, or the
Yeah.
exact consequence that naturally unfolded was, yeah, it's really tough that, daddy and me and everyone has picked, and now it's your turn. Next time, I wonder if you'll be first. So you're wondering out loud. It's not so overt. It's not like lesson, 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 because often toddlers, yeah, they might take it in, but like it can sort of just feel a little bit more like, I think, us trying to like wrap it
We're
up in
just
a
talking for the sake of
yeah,
talking, really. There's a lot of words
exactly.
there. She's not listening to any of that stuff.
She's
Right.
so internally driven, and it is just really a remembering again. They're not mapping these things out like against us. They are just still so impulsive and trying to resolve things as best they can with the skills they have. And so we really have to sometimes remember we are the ones who have probably more logic around it and more bird's eye view around it. Yeah, so they are definitely looking for our leadership as well. So
Well, I started you with an easy one where I was probably doing okay. Let's go with the second example. Okay, this was a morning. We were getting ready for school and daycare, and she wanted to wear two pairs of socks at the same time. So one over another. And that was a very, very important thing. But we couldn't get any of her shoes to fit over her socks. So we were in this kind of trying on. I was offering shoes. No, not those ones, these ones. I was trying to offer like a bigger pair of shoes that probably would fit over her socks. She didn't want those. She wanted like another pair and that wouldn't fit. And we just got stuck in this real pattern of like, well, you need to wear shoes when we're going into school. What are we going to do? And when my husband and I talked about it later, he's like, well, she just can't wear two socks. Like, that's it. And I was like, well, I think we can give her an option. Like if she does want to wear two socks, then she can wear the gum boots, but she wouldn't take the gum boots as the option. So I was kind of giving maybe a lot of options, and he was like, nah, just cut this down. Like, this is it. Here's the rules. And then we just got stuck in like, no, but there were two pairs of socks and she didn't have shoes and it was all a bit of a debacle. So talk me through this.
I just love this. Let's just stop for 1 second to appreciate. And most parents with a toddler will just be crying with laughter or crying like from actual sadness because this is our lives. Like these scenarios, how do they come up with these? Like they are so, and the thing is, it's always a setup for like no solution. And I think it's just really acknowledging that that is such a toddler thing, isn't it? Like,
oh. And it's always on a deadline. Like we need to get out of the house.
and I swear they get together at night, like when we're trying to get some sleep, and just come up with scenario after scenario that all match across the world. Because, I mean, it's crazy.
Guys, two pairs of socks, one on top of the other. Do not put your foot in a shoe. No shoes, no gumboots.
Oh, it's brilliant. Okay, so what was your, I guess, take on what you felt like was working or wasn't working in the scenario?
What wasn't working was I was trying to like roll with the two sock thing, but we couldn't find a solution that worked where she could just wear socks and no shoes, or like we couldn't find a pair of shoes that met her requirements. But then like pulling the socks, physically like taking the socks off her was gonna send us through this kind of big meltdowny phase as we were walking out the door. And it was kind of like, I don't know what's better here, or what. I don't particularly like sending her to daycare when she's already a bit upset around, already feeling really dysregulated. But then that's probably my like more permissive kind of part of that. I don't think anything really worked. I think we just had shoes in the car and I can't even remember what happened.
How did you feel about it afterwards? Because this is another thing. Like I love to talk to parents and be like, it's so important for us to reflect, and there's no like hard rules around this about like what you should have done or shouldn't have done. There's never that. Like I will never ever speak to anyone on a consult and say, this is what you should have done, this is what you shouldn't have done, because they are absolutely, it's just that parent-child relationship, right? But it's really important that if time after time after time a parent is coming away being like, I actually felt really defeated and I actually felt like maybe what she needed was me to take the lead, and I really would have felt great her going into school with her shoes and socks on like
like a dressed child. Yeah.
When you're sometimes almost going away from every time feeling like, oh, actually I feel a bit like, I don't know, like there's times we can be flexible with our toddlers and be like, like a lot of people say, don't pick every, you can't win every battle, or don't set up every battle. And I get that, but I just think, I just like to go, well, there's no hard right or wrong, but it is important to reflect around, like, do you think that's what she needed at the time? Like sometimes the really thing that I'm really conscious of with working with toddlers is, like I said to you, they set up these things where nothing is right? And this is sort of developmentally driven in a way because they are trying to achieve autonomy, take initiative, and that's hard. And they're going through those push-pull, like I'm in charge, but actually you better help me. And it's all a bit like, yeah, that's just part of their growing. But at the same time, a toddler will often set up these situations, especially before things like daycare or even after daycare, especially before a separation, where they have a lot of feelings to share actually. And they'll set up these things where nothing can resolve anything, like nothing can be fixed. And we'll go into fix it mode, like fix, 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 fix. And they'll set up a new one and a new one and a new one. And sometimes behind those setups is a need for someone to take like decisive action and say, that's not really working. It's really hard that it's not working. And you can be really sad if you need to. Mummy's here to listen to you. And like sometimes them needing to then cry or actually let out some of those feelings is why they kept setting them up. And that's sort of what we talk about. Like sometimes when we set a boundary, we free like that toddler to, like
let out all those
refresh, sort of like after the rain is a bit of a refresh. And that's actually sometimes how they connect with us in a deeper, more emotional level of like, I was really sad, mum was there, I felt really deeply connected to her, and now we're separating for the day, and now I feel sort of, so sometimes it's like reflecting on, I wonder why she was setting that up, and I wonder if she needed a fix, and especially if you came away feeling a little bit like, like defeated and like you wish there was another way there. So yeah, it's sort of, that's what I mean about, it's not like a right or wrong, but it is a reflecting on why they might be setting up these barriers,
Two things stood out to me there. And one is, I think you had said it to me. It was either you or Janet Lansbury, the two of you. I'm not, if it was Janet, it clearly wasn't to me directly, but she said it, was like deep connection isn't built in like those fun, happy times where you're playing at the park. Like deep connection with your kids is built during those meltdowns, during those tantrums.
Yeah,
when
we
you
definitely
are.
have talked about
Was
this.
that you?
Oh, yeah. Because
And I do.
It was one of my biggest revelations, because I remember trying to like, especially when our second born came along, I remember with our first, who was 3 at the time, trying to be like, we're going to go for ice cream, like we're going to like have this best time. And even after a best time, there always needed to be this incredible full on like unraveling meltdown. And then she was like all happy and settled, and I'd be like, oh, could we just have fun and not ruin the outing? Like, that narrative. And then when I realized, like that's sort of when she's feeling the most vulnerable and the most seen and heard, and especially if we're responding with like empathy and really welcoming those feelings. And you can sort of see the difference in that, like a date night when you're really like irritated at your husband versus a time where you've been really authentic about something that was a hard conversation, but like the difference, like if you have a lovely, there's all this crap underneath, you're like, well, so it sort of makes sense.
Yeah. I think like reframing that for me going into like drop off is probably helpful. I think the other thing was I was trying to give her choice and control, but there wasn't a clear end to that. And it just ended when I got too frustrated with how many choices there were, that it was like, well, that is it. Like I'm making a decision kind of vibe, which I think is the part that left me feeling uncomfortable. Like nobody actually ended up getting what they needed in that point in time. And so that idea of having a clear end to that, like I really felt like we were stuck in this, like, no, she was going to be right. No combo of socks was going to be right. So she probably was looking for that kind of release. And I did not want to get as frustrated as I did in that moment. So that I think that makes a lot of.
And this is why I love this parenting space. And I know some people would love me to just go A, B, C, and D, because I think we love that logic, but it's a relationship. We're not in a robotic system programming situation. I'm sure at times it would be easier to, and there are parts of parenting we can do that, like some predictability and stuff. But when it comes to this sort of rawness, it is two people in a relationship trying to figure out what the underlying needs are, and often trying to see the need beneath the behavior, which we struggle to do when we're also racing out the door. But even like knowing there's not one solution to everything, there might be a day where you're like, okay, cool, I'm just going to allow these feelings, and that's probably what she needs. But then there's times where I'm like, I've actually also know I've got a meeting to get to, so that's probably not the time I can allow these feelings right now. So we are just going to take the shoes and but it's more that decision making, because you like at least are reflecting about what's going on. And there are other times where I'm like, well, I don't have time for a full blown tantrum, and I don't want to send her in with 2 socks and no boots, So sometimes I'll offer power in another way that actually almost, it's different from distraction. It's not like, look at the birdie, it's tweeting. It's an intentional decision to offer power in, say, attachment play or something, to still dislodge the same need for power. And often I can then be removing the socks while we're finishing off. So there are times I've been at a headlock with our 3-year-old as well, But it's good to have some of those other strategies that you can decide which one's going to work for this day, because I don't actually just have, it's not always just going, oh, I've got to now save an hour for a full blown tantrum, because that's not
Yeah.
realistic either. And that's because you have needs in this parenting and they do, both do, not just them, you know?
So in that example, what would you like if you were going to offer another way for power? What would that look like?
So sometimes it's been power reversal play, which I love because it puts her in charge. So sometimes it would just be like, whether it be, let's play a quick game of follow the leader, or something where she gets to decide, you know, it's got to be short and quick, or like
Yeah.
she comes and chooses my socks, or something that's still related to what we're
Yeah.
doing. Or we're so busy focusing on choosing her shoes that she gets to choose my shoes, or yeah, so stuff that just gives her some element of power. Other times it's something just really like nonsense play, or there's I think 9 different types of attachment play, and we've got a couple of those resources, but we try to actually have one for every part of the day of transitions, because that's the biggest time toddlers will put up blocks. I know one we use a lot. We use it after screens. We use it often at headlocks about things like this. It's just a physical game. So sometimes it's a wheelbarrow where I've got her leg, she's got her feet, or I'm on the floor and I'm flying her in the air with my feet. But it seems to always be the thing that just unlocks. Like really what it is doing is also shifting. It's not only like dislodging a bit of laughter and other feelings that come up, but it's also shifting the brain from that sort of freeze zone into like a little bit more to the front of the brain. So yeah, it's just knowing, let's think how we can work with her system, because they do get stuck. Toddlers do get stuck a lot, and they don't have the skills to get unstuck. And so if we can understand their brain and their body and their nervous system a little bit, we can sort of help them shift gears sometimes.
And I do love that about toddlers, when you can help them get out of that, even though she's been crying about like socks and shoes for 30 minutes, it can stop, and then we can kind of move on with the next
And
thing.
you can sort of see it is almost like, if you try and imagine, it is like a car stuck in the wrong gear trying to go a certain speed, and you shift gears and it goes smooth again. That's almost what it feels like. And there are actually scientific ways to, and that's where I do like, you know, there's the reflection part of parenting, but there are also ways of going, oh, actually, scientifically, we know if they engage in this and this and this, that sort of helps.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
I
sort of
guess you can offer those, right? And like you can offer an opportunity to like get into the right gear. And if it still doesn't work, then you can like confidently pick them up and move on with the day, because you have to.
Well, that's the thing. And I think that's where you always still fall back on, whether it's, I actually love, this was another thing that I remember hearing early in my parenting with the first toddler, was like, sometimes, whether it be the right decision, the wrong decision, permissive decision, authoritarian, whatever decision you make, but it's confident, it still sometimes helps the toddler feel more settled, even if you made the wrong call at the time, but you did it quite confidently and quite with a bit of oomph behind you, of like, this is what we're doing now. Like, even if everyone's crying, including you, like, it's just better to make those calls than like be flailing around in no man's land, because they are still looking for someone to make the call, even if it was like you wish you had said it slightly gentler or whatever. They are only, I know they feel like really big and in charge, because they really do put up a pretty good, I was intimidated by my 3-year-old, and sometimes still am. Like, me and my husband will look at each other and be like, are we getting owned? Like, we're getting completely owned right now. like they do put up a pretty strong I am the boss situation. And I sometimes am like, you know,
Maybe you are.
yeah, like just realizing, wow, I really am being completely like, I'm, you know, changing this and straightening that and folding this and moving that there. And then I just wake up and be like, oh, actually, why am I doing everything exactly as you're saying? Like, who's in charge here, you know?
That's me this morning as I'm lining up my coffee next to her cup and this, you know, train of like breakfast things. I'm like, why am I doing this?
I know, it's so funny. Oh, it's probably because we're exhausted. Yeah.
That's a big part of it. All right. I feel like I have some good clarity around that for next time. And I do think what you've said about the confident there, I do think I only was confident in my response when I was frustrated enough that I wasn't having this anymore. And that's what wrapped that up. And it wasn't necessarily how I wanted to wrap it up, but if I could actually confidently do that in another way, I think that gives me earlier on. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I definitely sometimes think acting promptly, especially if you can start to feel yourself getting a little bit frustrated, it's like better to set your limit before you're at your limit, because at least then it's slightly like, even when it comes to car seats and that, a lot of people will say to me like, but they just never get in. And I'm like, when you're ready. And like, there are some times where it's like, actually, I'm going to help you in now before I'm at this aggressive state of probably needing to actually pin you down, because else we're not going anywhere to get the seatbelt on. So That's setting your limit just before you're at it. And this is why I do like the parent perspective, because when you're looking at your partner dealing with the same thing, you can sometimes see the bird's eye view. And that's the other thing we need to remember. Like I love even talking to other people about my parenting journey because I'm in it. And even though I have these sort of ideas and things, and I love parent consults because I'm the one hovering over and I can see in it. When we're in it, we can't see it. So sometimes when a partner, even though you want to throw something at their head, says, I wonder if like she wanted this, or you could have said no to 2 socks. And you're like, well, I want you to shut up. But it sort of is sometimes because they have been hearing and seeing that you've been caught in a web. I
Yes.
know we don't want to admit that, but it's true.
I was deep in the web, but I also was like, oh, not 2 socks. What a great suggestion. Truth. All right. Let me hit you with the third one. And I feel like this is like a really regular part of our life. Is these like just general large meltdowns that don't seem to come from anything in particular or come from something really minor. And so like we'll be drawing and she will decide she wanted to draw something different, for example, and it will just be this huge meltdown. And again, like I'm like, cool, I'm okay with all feelings. I will have like a limit on behavior, but I feel like nothing is right. And maybe this links back to the point that you were talking about before. I'm trying to model problem solving, like, okay, so we could start a new one, we could choose a new color. And she's just like, shut up. That is not like helpful to me. And so we just can't fix the problem. And I find it frustrating because we will be playing quite nicely. Like if I'm playing with the girls, she's upset about something. She wanted the thing that Elsie has, or she wanted something else, or something wasn't right. And it just makes her more and more mad. That is our like consistent challenge. And so I feel like this is when we're all a bit walking on eggshells, trying to not poke the bear,
Yeah.
in games or in anything like that. And I don't feel like it doesn't feel great. Yeah,
And so
so
what
talk
have
to
you
me.
thought? What have you thought? Like, you know how we talked about before, like, well, maybe like, I don't know, maybe she needs, whatever, like maybe it's bratty behavior. Like, have you thought like, is this something I need to curb? Or like, because like you said, it's quite interesting how cycles do, and we all do it, because we can predict a reaction that's going to happen based on something that's happened. And because it happens regularly, we start to predict without even knowing we're on guard going, like, I know when we get in the car, she's going to start screaming for a song. And when we put the song on, this is her poor older sisters as well, other DJs. So they've got
Yeah.
Spotify and she's like screaming what song she wants. And then they put on the song she wants and she's like, not this one. And my
Yeah.
oldest was like, Mom, I cannot go in the car with her anymore. I cannot do it. I'm like, I know, like it's so hard. But she's just locked. And now that's her cycle, right? So like, but then like you start to think, oh, well, what else are you going to do? Like, I mean, how do you punish like that? How do you know what I mean? Like it's so tricky because I guess the catering to being like, oh, well, we'll just let you have what Elsie had so that you can be happy.
Mm.
Often that's not enough anyways, is it? Like,
And I do notice my older daughter like trying to solve it for her. And I'm like, no, it's not your problem to fix here. Like, this isn't something that you need to keep someone else happy about. Because then I'm conscious, like, oh gosh, now she's like trying to please, this
because
unpleasable
no one
kid.
wants a
And
screaming kid, right? Like it's like
right.
let's all be real. Like we all want to say like all feelings are welcome, like not all behaviors, but sometimes I'm just like, could you
Stop crying.
back inside because I would like to drink 1 cup of like water in peace, like coffee, like it's tricky and it is a very 3-year-old thing, like that dissatisfaction and those demands that are endless
Oh my
slash.
God, Mandy, just that dissatisfaction, that is the thing. And do you know what? I actually have just realized what triggers me is that, or like what frustrates me the most is like, we are doing something nice together and
Yeah.
you are dissatisfied. Like, how can you be dissatisfied during this moment of niceness?
Right, I know what you mean, and that's the thing. It is, and that is really what it is. It's this sort of nothing, like you said, nothing can be right, and even as good as it gets. And that sort of can also trigger for us a bit, like, why are you so like high maintenance, really, or
Yes.
entitled, right? Because we are like, I don't want to keep building this little brat that like, and that is,
Yes.
I think, the worry a lot of us have when we are engaging in this whole concept of, well, feelings are okay. But what it tells me when they're so dysregulated like that, and when they are so dissatisfied and seem to be stuck in like a state of, is usually that there is stuff to share, like for whatever reason. Sometimes that might be aftercare. Maybe they're just, like maybe genuinely their whole little systems are a bit tighter at the end of the day, whatever. So try to look at sometimes when those things happen. And if they always happen at the same time, it could also be that that's their way of integrating into play. Like it's become their pattern, like I do all this. So sometimes trying to have things to try that are going to be more grounding for her. Like she's obviously in a state where her nervous system is feeling like wrecked and she needs some grounding. So different children with different sensory needs, like I remember finding, like if we went home and tried to do something crafty and creative that engages the brain in like a really detailed way, it was almost too much energy. But if we went straight outside and we're doing a bit more heavy work with her body, it was more regulating. So sometimes it's actually just shifting the environment / the activities when they're just stuck in this like constant meltdown cycle. And it is really hard because I don't necessarily think sometimes we want to fix, or like you said, like, but we'll try sharpen the pencil and then we'll get a purple one. And they're like, well, actually, I just want to feel like rubbish, or I want to move on from this because this isn't working for me anyway. So maybe like shifting completely to sounds to me like her little body would do well with some like actual acts of grounding stuff when she's feeling like that. So sometimes it is us trying to figure out what can I offer her system that's going to ground her right now. And sometimes it's going, okay, well, like she is overstimulated and actually needs some space to regulate. So sometimes it's putting more input and sometimes it's reducing the amount of input. So putting more input might be going on like pushing like the heavy wheelbarrow in the backyard or something like that. That's a bit more, physical, or going to jump on a trampoline or bounce with you or be with you, do a running race, stuff like that. Because it shifts, again, her brain. And sometimes it's the opposite of that, where they actually need to be taken away from all the things and sit listening to a listening story, or like containment is what they call it, where you take away that environment that's actually feeding her too much and she needs. So in a way, it's really going, okay, if she's having all these meltdowns, she's showing me she's dysregulated. What we need to figure out is what is her toolkit. It might be different to what your other daughters would be, because she's getting the connection, she's getting the attention. It could also be related to the fact that you're with both of them.
Yeah,
and
I think
sometimes
that's a big part of it.
It's really tricky because even though like you're going from one to the other, to the other, to the other, there are certain temperaments who will feel like maybe 5 or 10 minutes by themselves with them only and then swapping, which is hard. Let's be real. That's such a hard juggle because every child will always be seeking us out. And we've played around with all versions of these things, but it's sort of going, well, this is what it is, but there's not just one solution to this. It's not just letting her have all her meltdowns or being in trouble for having all her meltdowns. She's just clearly letting you know my whole system's cooked.
It's interesting though, because I actually feel quite relieved by that, in that like there are things I can try, but equally there aren't things that like I must do in those situations. Like I actually feel better thinking like that. Like I can give it an option, we can change gear, but equally like it's I think it's more my frustration at the dissatisfaction than anything, and kind of acknowledging like that is a big part of 3, and like she's probably going to cry quite a lot, and that is not a sign of us getting it wrong, more that like there's a lot going on and I can try and regulate, co-regulate at those times, but equally it's not my job to kind of stop the feelings, right? So
and that's the tricky part, isn't it? Like I would also say, like our daughter's 3.5, and definitely like, and I know a lot of people talk about terrible 2s and stuff, but this is why I like this space of just talking about 3. And even recently, actually, my members' live Q&A today was all about 4, because usually, I know you can say like, oh, but every age has got some things going on for it. There's some growth and things are getting better at or easier for you as a parent. And there's some things where you're like, oh, I didn't expect this. I thought now that they're a kindy, they're just, all my expectations for them increased, like, but it's actually still, as you know, like with even Elsie growing up, there's other things.
Yeah.
It does help to have these perspectives where you go, I guess as parents, like maybe in the past, a good child would have been one who like comes to the table because you say, and then
it's me. Hi.
Shoes and socks, and then like doesn't cry all day. Like, but I would say 3.5. I would say most days there are patches in the day of just real crying over like,
Yeah.
I actually couldn't tell you what. And it's funny because she's our third born. There's this different response naturally in me that is so like less this crazy urgency to like solve. So I think there's some validity in it because I'm just like, there you are as your own person having your feelings. But like, I do think that urgency, especially as a first time parent, we were like almost feel almost like we both have their feelings. So we come
Yeah.
urgently to fix. But I don't know if it's being third and I'm so deep in now that I just don't have the capacity of empathy or something anymore. But I'm truly empathetic for her. But I'm like, there you are with your feelings. And I'm here and we've got to keep momentumly going forward. And she, do you know, I think
Yeah.
wrapped up in like letting it really upset you. And then they feed off that as well. Like we'll often have families say, oh, I was, at this thing and they were upset. And now every time we're there, they're upset. And then when you think about it, it's because the parent's quite on edge.
Mm.
Like that whole concept of they'll feed off. If you like starting your beautiful drawing and then she's upset and then you're like, we can get the purple pen, but you're upset. Do you know what I mean? Like we feed off each other a lot as well. So sometimes it is sort of like offering a couple of ideas or whatever, but definitely not going into this hyper, my job is to fix all of your feelings right now.
Yeah.
And that's
And try
different
and
than what we think
circumvent
good
them, right?
parenting looks like, right? We sometimes think, well, a good parent, I don't know, it's the narrative we have around what it is to.
And I think it's around spending quality time, right? I remember post Christmas sharing something about like, I thought flying a kite together would be a fun thing that we could do post Christmas. And like,
Yeah,
literally,
I
no
love your realness. So people
one.
love that, I reckon. It's so good.
But I think that's a bit about parenting I really didn't expect was like the enjoyable parts. Somebody was unhappy at some point during all the enjoyable parts. I thought we
And the
would be
more
like
kids you have, the more
skipping
likelihood, like
through
me and my
holding hands.
the probability now is just cooked because we've got three and like it's very rare that on an outing all three are satisfied.
Yeah.
Very rare, like, but does that mean we change the attitude? And this is where I think it's breeding the entitlement. I think if we start shifting everything to make
Mm,
everyone happy, I think that's a totally different approach. I think if we allow them to be unhappy, and it's hard for us to hear their unhappiness about it, but we're like, it's hard. We're going to be at this park for another half an hour. You can kick the ball or you can sit on the bench. Like, this is obviously now we've got older children as well, so we've got to flex for different people. But just that whole concept of sometimes I've thought, are we raising entitled brats? But one thing me and my husband have talked about is one thing our children aren't afraid to do is let us know how they feel about something. And I
yeah.
think a lot of encourage them to do that from a young age. Like, so maybe like in another generation, there'd be lots of feelings, but they'd just be shoved right back down in. So as parents, it's hard for us to hear that they're upset. So it sounds like they're whining and complaining, but they're just letting us know that we said all feelings are valid.
Yes.
Behaviors.
That's a good
So
point.
sometimes I do go like, oh, maybe we should have toned down on the like, share your feelings with me situation.
Share your feelings, but please just stop crying.
Exactly. Oh,
Oh,
so
I think that gave me a lot of validation and a lot just that kind of reset, right? Of like, yeah, okay. Like if I was permissive, I would be doing a lot more. Or if I was really coming down hard on her, that would look a different way. But I'm not. This is the kind of middle ground that works for us.
and
And
just knowing that there are lots of options. Like I think that the bigger our toolbox and the understanding of toddler brains and like games we can play to shift them or quality time or saying it's okay to be sad, but we're going to be moving now. So like there's leadership, but there's also some attachment play. So I love that because I don't think it needs to be. Yeah, I just think those strategies in the past of like, this is our 7-point book of how to stop a tantrum. I just think that's not really engaging the relationship part of our parenting, where it's actually like an individual mom being triggered by an individual child who then needs to reflect a little bit about the options they have in that moment.
yeah,
And that's where we grow with our child, right? So I just,
yes.
that's more enjoyable, I think, as well, more
All right.
eye-opening.
So if people want to learn all about this or they want to book in for a consult with you individually about their individual child, where do they go?
Yes, come and visit us at Raise Toddlers. Our handle is at Raise Toddlers on Instagram or our website, www.raisetoddlers.com.au. And you can have a look at our membership options, 1 month, 3 month, or 12-month membership options, which has lots of like videos, resources, all that attachment play stuff I talked about. Just loads of workshops that you have access to, and then we also do have one-on-one consults with myself. We also have a child psychologist on our team and an occupational therapist, so we look at lots of like temperaments and sensory profiles of little ones so you can understand what's driving your own child's behavior. and just make you feel like more confident and give you that clarity as a parent. So yeah, we'd love to see you, and just drop a DM to say hi if you listen to this podcast.
As always, thank you for being here. I feel restored and calm and ready to go back into this parenting gig in like 25 minutes. Let's do
And
it.
ready to book our hotel stay again.
2025, come at me.
Stay. Like, what else can we celebrate? Come on.
You're the best. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Kai.
A huge thanks for tuning in and listening to my podcast. This is all brand new for me, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Give me a review or send me a DM. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And above all, I'd really love you to hit that subscribe button to keep listening. Thanks.